You know that person in your neighborhood. Maybe it's your uncle, maybe it's your coworker who pulls into the parking lot every morning in the same faded blue pickup truck he's been driving since before your kids were born. The paint is chalking at the edges. The door hinge squeaks in a very specific way that everyone around him has memorized. The bed has a few rust spots and a dent from 1998 that he never got around to fixing. The seats have cracks. The interior still has that cracked plastic dashboard and AM/FM radio, and a small pine tree air freshener that stopped smelling like pine around the second Obama administration. The dashboard has survived more summers than some people have been alive. And yet, he gets in every morning, turns the key, drives away, 30 years, same truck. And if you're honest, part of you wonders, why? Why hasn't he upgraded? Why hasn't he moved on? You've seen this man. You know exactly who we're talking about. He's not struggling. He's got a decent job. He owns his home. His kids are grown. He could walk into any dealership and drive off in something new. Something with backup cameras and Apple CarPlay and a bed liner that didn't come from Sears in 1994. But he doesn't. And here's what makes it interesting. He doesn't seem bothered by it. He's not making excuses. He's not avoiding the topic. He just doesn't think about it the way you do. He pats the hood of that old truck the same way some people pat a loyal dog. Like there's something between them. Like there's a history there that can't be replicated by a monthly payment and a factory warranty. But what is that something? What is really going on? Most people assume it's about money. He's cheap. That's the first instinct. He doesn't want to spend the cash. He's holding on to every dollar like it owes him something. But that's where the easy explanation runs out. Because if you've watched him closely, you've noticed he doesn't cut corners in other parts of his life. He takes vacations. He buys good tools. He'll spend $300 on a set of tires without blinking. He's not scared of money. He's not white-knuckling his wallet. So the cheap theory doesn't hold. The second assumption is stubbornness. He's set in his ways. The older generation thing. Resistant to change. A little bit proud about it too. And sure, maybe there's a grain of that in there. But stubbornness alone doesn't explain 30 years of consistency. Stubbornness doesn't create peace, it creates friction. And this man doesn't seem to be at war with anything. Think about it. What if neither of those explanations is correct? Here's where things get interesting. Psychology tells us that the things people hold on to longest are rarely about the objects themselves. They're about what those objects represent. And a truck that someone has driven for 30 years isn't just a truck anymore. It's a psychological landmark. It's a fixed point in a world that keeps moving. Think about how much has changed in 30 years. Jobs, relationships, homes, beliefs, friendships. Almost nothing in a human life stays the same for 3 decades, except this truck. It's been there through the promotions and the setbacks, through the births and the losses, through the version of him that existed in his 30s and the versions that exists now. When everything else evolves, some people find enormous psychological comfort in one thing that stays the same. That's not weakness. That's a kind of quiet architecture. Now let's go deeper, because the truck is just the surface. Psychologists talk a lot about something called identity anchoring, the human need to have objects, routines, and symbols that confirm who we are. When your sense of self is stable, you don't need the outside world to keep reflecting it back to you. You don't need a new truck to feel like yourself. That is actually a profound form of confidence. Not the loud kind. Not the kind that needs witnesses. The quiet kind. The kind that has already decided who it is and doesn't need a financing deal to prove it. But here's the strange part. Most people confuse that kind of confidence with being behind, as if a person who doesn't upgrade is somehow failing to keep up. And that assumption tells us something very revealing, not about the man in the truck, but about everyone watching him. Think about your neighbor who traded in her car every 3 years without fail. Always the newest model. Always the freshest trim level. And when you asked her why, she'd say something about reliability, about safety features, about just wanting something nice. But watch what happens when she drives up to a gathering and someone doesn't notice the new car. There's this flicker, a small disappointment, like something didn't land the way it was supposed to. Now think about the man in the truck at the same gathering. He parks it in the back, walks in, talks to people, eats his food. He's not waiting for anyone to say anything about the truck. He doesn't need that loop to close. That gap between those two people, that's not a financial gap. That's not a taste gap. That is the gap between needing external validation and not needing it. And most of us spend our entire adult lives somewhere in that gap, never realizing it. So, what does 30 years in the same truck really mean? It means this person has solved a problem that a lot of people never solve, the problem of enoughness. Social comparison is one of the most powerful and exhausting forces in human psychology. We are wired to look sideways, to measure ourselves against the people around us. And consumer culture is built on that instinct. It feeds it, it amplifies it. It tells us that the newest thing is the closest thing to status, and that status is the closest thing to self-worth. But here's the quiet rebellion in that old truck. It says, I already know what I'm worth. I figured that out a long time ago. And it didn't require a new model year. What does this really mean? It means that the truck isn't a statement of poverty or stubbornness. It's a statement of psychological completion. A person who has stopped asking the world to tell them who they are. And that, in a culture absolutely saturated with status signals and upgrade cycles, is genuinely rare. We live in a world that treats constant upgrading as a sign of success and growth. Newer phone, newer car, newer wardrobe, newer identity. The message is everywhere. The current version of you is not enough. Keep moving, keep acquiring, keep becoming. And so we chase, most of us, without even realizing we're chasing. Because the chase feels like progress. But what if the man in the old truck figured out something the rest of us are still working toward? What if enough is not a settling point? What if enough is actually the destination? What if success, true success, isn't a new vehicle every 4 years? What if it's waking up in the morning with nothing to prove to anyone, including yourself? There is a specific kind of peace that comes from identity stability, from knowing exactly who you are, and not needing your possessions to announce it for you. It's not dramatic, it doesn't photograph well, nobody claps for it at a dinner party. But it's real, and it's rare, and it tends to show up in the parking lot of a hardware store on a Saturday morning in a faded blue truck with a squeaky door hinge. So here's the question worth sitting with. When you think about upgrading your car, your phone, your wardrobe, your home, how much of that is actually about function? How much of it is about utility, about real practical need? And how much of it is about something else? About the way it will look, about what it will say, about the story you hope it tells about who you've become and where you're headed? Most of us, if we're honest, have a complicated answer to that question. The man in the old truck already answered it. 30 years ago, or maybe without even knowing it, he decided that his sense of self didn't live in a vehicle, didn't live in a showroom, didn't require a loan or a lease or a fresh set of chrome rims. It lived in him. And every morning when he turns that key and that old engine catches, that's not a man who can't afford better. That's a man who already has everything he needs. What do you drive? And what does it say about you?